Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
Are you caught in a cycle of repeated arguments and emotional distance in your marriage? Have you tried every communication tool and script only to find nothing seems to stick? Today, we're talking about what complex PTSD can look like in a marriage, not as a diagnosis, not as a label, and not as something to use against your spouse, but as a way to understand patterns that so many couples are living inside without having language for them. Now, CPTSD, complex post traumatic stress disorder, is a mental health condition that can develop after prolonged or repeated trauma. And it's not usually just one event, but it's long term emotional stress. It often leads to difficulty regulating emotions, a negative or critical self view, and real struggles in relationships. And unfortunately, this is how it often plays out inside marriages. Someone with CPTSD may experience intense emotional reactions, explosive anger, deep sadness, and sudden shutdowns. They may struggle with self worth, feel stuck on past experiences, or have a hard time feeling safe in close relationships, even loving ones. And I want to say this clearly too. CPTSD doesn't only come from what people call big T trauma. It can come from neglect, from chaotic or unpredictable homes, from growing up without consistent emotional safety or care. These experiences shape the nervous system. And when they don't disappear just because someone grows up, just because someone gets married, or because they look fine on the outside. They show up in relationships, in how conflict escalates, in how closeness can feel very risky, in how one or both partners become dysregulated, overwhelmed, reactive, or shut down, even during moments that don't seem that big. This episode isn't about diagnosing your spouse. Only a trained professional can do that. But it's about recognizing when dysregulation may be driving the dynamic and why normal relationship advice often doesn't work when safety isn't present in the nervous system. My husband and I, we had to learn this together. We had to understand his triggers and also my own protective responses so our relationship didn't keep living in these same painful cycles. And that's what this episode is all about. It's not blaming, it's not labels, but rather understanding what's happening so things don't have to stay this way. Okay, so take a breath. You're not behind, you're not imagining this. You're learning how to see the relationship more clearly. So before we go any further, I want to slow this down for a moment because when people hear CPTSD, it's easy for fear or assumptions to rush in. So let's get really clear. CPTSD is not a personality flaw. It's not someone being difficult, dramatic, or emotionally immature. And it's not a life sentence for your marriage. CPTSD is what happens when a nervous system has spent a long time adapting to an unsafe or unpredictable environment. It's the result of learning how to survive, not how to connect. And that distinction matters. Now, I want to address something I hear all the time. I have CPTSD and I don't act like that. And that can absolutely be true. Every person is different. Every nervous system adapts differently. And every couple experiences patterns in their own way. So some people with CPTSD externalize it through anger, defensiveness, or control, whereas others internalize it through shame, withdrawal, anxiety, or depression. Some couples can see intense conflict. Others see silence, distance, or emotional disappearance. None of that makes one experience more valid than another. But if we can't talk honestly about how CPTSD can show up in relationships, especially when it goes unrecognized, then we leave a lot of people suffering in silence. We leave partners confused. We leave couples stuck. And we leave well-meaning people blaming themselves for dynamics they don't understand. CPTSD is not someone choosing to overreact, someone intentionally pushing you away, or someone refusing to grow. And it's also not something you can fix by loving harder, explaining better, or staying quieter. What CPTSD is a nervous system that learned to stay alert, to scan for danger, to brace for loss, to protect itself at all costs. So reactions feel intense, shutdowns can feel really sudden, and closeness can feel overwhelming, even when love is present. Understanding CPTSD isn't about excusing harm. It's about creating language. Because when we can name what's happening, we can finally talk about what helps. And without that, we all keep trying to survive relationships that were meant to feel safe. Now, marriage asks more of us emotionally than almost any other relationship, right? It requires closeness, vulnerability, repair, and consistency. And when CPTSD is part of the picture, those very things can activate the nervous system. And it's not because someone doesn't want love, but because love requires safety. For a nervous system that's shaped by prolonged stress or emotional unsafety, intimacy can feel very risky. Being seen can feel dangerous. Depending on someone can feel terrifying. So the body does what it learned to do best: protect. That protection might look like defensiveness, or control, or withdraw, or emotional shutdown. And here's where so many couples get stuck. Marriage becomes the place where old survival strategies collide with present day expectations. One partner reaches for connection, the other feels overwhelmed. One wants to talk it through, while the other one needs distance. One feels abandoned, and the other feels trapped. But neither person is wrong, but both are dysregulated. That's why these patterns can feel so painful and so confusing. You're not just dealing with the issue in front of you, you're dealing with two nervous systems, each carrying their own history, trying to feel safe at the same time. And when safety is missing, even small moments can feel huge. A tone of voice, a look, question. These moments might seem insignificant on the surface, but inside a marriage, they can set off old alarms. And this is how emotional loops form. Arguments that circle back again and again, silences that stretch longer each time, and a loneliness you can feel even when you're sitting right next to each other. Understanding this doesn't mean your marriage is broken. It means the relationship has become the stage where unhealed patterns are finally visible. And visibility is the first step towards change. So let's talk about what all of this actually looks like inside a marriage. And not in theory, not in diagnostic language, you guys, but in real everyday moments. Because this is where so many women start recognizing their own lives. One of the first things I hear is this: walking on eggshells. You never quite know what's going to set off your spouse. A simple comment about how to load the dishwasher, a question about weekend plans. Something that feels really neutral to you suddenly explodes into a big reaction. So you start tiptoeing, monitoring your tone, thinking 3 steps ahead before you speak. Not because you want to, but because it feels safer. Then there's conflict that escalates out of nowhere. What starts as a small disagreement, like who's picking up the kids, money, schedules, it suddenly snowballs. Their nervous system goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Maybe they get angry and defensive. Maybe they shut down completely. Maybe they'll go quiet or cold or overwhelmed. Either way, the intensity feels wildly out of proportion to the situation in front of you. Another pattern I see constantly is withdrawal and silence. You finally build the courage to bring something up. You speak really carefully. You try to do it right. And then nothing. Silence, hours, sometimes days. And you're left feeling like you don't even exist in the relationship. Then there are mistrust and control patterns. Even when you're trying to help, it feels like they don't trust your intentions, or they need things done a very specific way to feel safe. And when it's not done right, it turns into conflict. And it's not because you messed up, but because control has become their version of safety. And finally, shame spirals. After the blow up, they collapse. They say things like, I'm just the problem. You'd be better off without me. I ruin everything. And suddenly you're reassuring them. You're soothing, you're caretaking while your own needs quietly disappear from the room. Here's the really tricky part. From the outside, none of this looks like trauma. It looks like personality quirks, like emotional immaturity, like someone who's just difficult. But underneath, this is the nervous system replaying old survival strategies that they needed at one time. The part of them that learned long ago that safety was never guaranteed. And when that trick gets triggered inside a marriage, both of you end up stuck in the same loop. Conflict, withdraw, shame, repeat. And it's not because you don't love each other, but because survival keeps hijacking connection. And this is where so many couples start feeling hopeless because you're doing what you've been told to do, right? You're using the tools, you're trying to communicate better, you're following the advice that works for other couples, and yet nothing changes. And here's why. Most communication advice assumes something really important, that both people are regulated. It assumes emotional safety. It assumes the nervous system is calm enough to stay present. It assumes the conversation is happening in the present moment. But when CPTSD is part of the relationship, those assumptions don't hold. When a nervous system is dysregulated, it is not listening for understanding, you guys. It's scanning for threat. So a calm tone can still feel dangerous. A reasonable rest request can feel really overwhelming. And well-timed conversations can still trigger defensiveness or shutdown. This is why you can say all the right things and still end up right back where you started. And it's not that you're bad at communicating. It's because communication can't override survival. And that's where the familiar advice shows up. If things get heated, take a break, wait 20 or 30 minutes, then come back and talk it through. Now, in theory, this makes total sense and works for lots of people. But if you're in a trauma-impacted relationship, you already know the problem. When one or both of you are triggered, there is no set timeline for when regulation returns. Sometimes it's not 30 minutes. Sometimes it's hours. Sometimes it's days. And forcing a conversation before both nervous systems are ready, it doesn't lead to resolution. It leads to more damage. So many women tell me, I know better than to push it. I can tell he's not ready. And that awareness matters. But here's the other side that rarely gets talked about. When there's no agreed upon way to come back, the conversation often never happens at all, right? Things calm down, life moves on, and you think, why bring it up now? Things are finally okay. Why would I rock the boat? But here's the truth. The only time you can have a real conversation is when things are calm, not in the middle of dysregulation, not when emotions are flooding the system, but when safety has returned. So avoiding the conversation in those calm moments, it doesn't protect the relationship. It quietly erodes it because the issue doesn't disappear. it just gets buried. And buried emotions don't heal. They resurface later, often louder, often messier, and often through the same emotional loops you've been trying to escape. Those reactions might seem small in the moment, a sharp tone, a defensive response, a shutdown, but when they collide inside a marriage, they create arguments that circle back, silences that stretch longer each time, and a kind of loneliness you can feel even when you're sitting right next to each other. So, this isn't about forcing a rigid timeline. That ignores trauma. It's not about avoiding hard conversations altogether. It's about learning a different rhythm, one that says we don't talk when we're flooded, and we don't pretend it didn't matter once things are calm. That balance, regulation before resolution, is where real change begins. So, if communication alone isn't the answer, what actually helps? We're going to come back to this after a short commercial break.
Banging your head against the wall trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma? It doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Okay, so if communication alone isn't the answer, what does actually help? This is where I want to be very clear. This is not about fixing your spouse. And it's not about you becoming the regulator for the entire relationship. What helps is shifting the focus from trying to resolve everything to creating enough safety for change to happen. Okay, the first shift is this: regulation before resolution. I think you heard this loud and clear. If one or both nervous systems are overwhelmed, nothing productive is going to happen. For example, you're in the middle of a conversation and you notice his tone is changing. His body is tensing. Your chest tightens. Old you might push forward, trying to finish the conversation, explain harder. A different approach sounds like, I don't think either of us is in a place to talk through this right now, so let's pause and come back to it. Not to avoid, but to protect the relationship. The second shift is slowing everything down. Trauma lives in urgency. Healing does not. And that might mean shorter conversations instead of long ones. 10 minutes, 2 minutes, you guys, instead of an hour. One issue at a time instead of everything all at once. For example, instead of revisiting the entire argument from yesterday, you may just want to say, hey, I wanted to talk about what happened when I brought up the schedule. This is small, contained, and manageable. And the third shift is understanding your role and your limits. You can support safety. You can name patterns. You can choose how to respond, but you cannot regulate another adult's nervous system for them. For example, Instead of jumping in to soothe, explain, or fix, when he spirals into shame or anger, you might say, I care about you, but I'm not going to carry all of this for both of us. That's not abandonment, that's a boundary. And boundaries are part of safety. Another important shift is learning when to come back to conversations, not on a rigid timeline, but not never. For example, when things are calm, not in the heat of the moment, you might say something like, there's something from earlier I'd like to talk about when we're both in a good place. Because calm is not the absence of the issue. It's the window where real conversation is possible. And here's something I wish someone had told me sooner. Progress doesn't look like the absence of triggers. It looks like shorter loops. So instead of days of distance, maybe it's hours. Instead of spiraling into self-blame, you catch it way sooner. Instead of feeling lost, you recognize the pattern and you think, oh, this is dysregulation, not failure. This work isn't fast and it isn't perfect, but it is possible. And even small shifts made consistently can change the entire feel of a relationship. Now, as we wrap up, I want to pause here for a moment. Because if this episode resonated, it's likely not because you're looking for more information. It's because you've been living this. And awareness, while powerful, is only the first step. What most women tell me at this point is, okay, this makes sense, but what do I actually do with this? And that question is exactly why I created my CARE framework. CARE isn't about fixing your spouse. It's about becoming the calm one all the time. And it's not about becoming the calm one all the time. And it's not about tolerating things that are harming you. It's a way of understanding how to care for yourself inside a trauma-impacted marriage, how to respond differently to dysregulation, how to create clarity instead of confusion, and how to engage without losing yourself. It gives you language, it gives you structure, and it gives you a steadier place to stand, even when things feel uncertain. And if you're ready to go deeper into this, not just hearing concepts, but actually learning how to apply them, I want to personally invite you to my upcoming live workshop. In this workshop, we're going to walk through how the CARE framework applies to your relationship, how to recognize your partner's triggers and your own protective responses, how to break those emotional loops we talked about today, and how to stop carrying all the weight by yourself. This isn't therapy, and it's not about diagnosing anyone. It's about practical understanding, real life application, and support from someone who's been there and from other women who truly get it. If you've been thinking, I don't want to keep doing this the same way, this is your step. You'll find the details to join the live workshop on my website, www.daniellesebastian.com, and it's in the show notes. And whether you join me there or continue learning here, please remember this. You're not crazy. You are not failing, and you are not alone in this. There is another way forward, and you don't have to figure it all out by yourself. All right, I will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach. All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.